It does not get bigger than this. The championship chariot awaits. But who is going to take the call? Who is going to get in that chariot at the end of 90 minutes on the 18th of May? Bolton face Oxford in the playoff final in what is going to be an exciting, enthralling game. Is it going to be a defensive masterclass by Des Buckingham and his Oxford United side? Or is it going to be attacking brilliance in a thrashing by Bolton Wanderers? We're going to get into that in this video in just a moment. But first off, thank you for all the support on the channel recently. We've hit a massive amount of subscribers over the past month. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below. Let me know your predictions heading into this playoff final. I think both teams can count themselves lucky for getting into the final. But shall we now get into the preview? So here we have it. Ian Evatt takes on Des Buckingham. Dion Charles versus Mark Harris. We've got two teams here who, in my opinion, can count themselves lucky to even be in the final. I thought Oxford United did a splendid defensive masterclass on Peterborough United, but ultimately I thought Peterborough were the better side over two legs. I think with Bolton and Barnsley, I thought Bolton left the game too wide open at times for Barnsley, and I think in the end, I think Barnsley were the better side over the two ties. I thought Bolton Wanderers did just enough to get themselves into the lead in both games, and I think ultimately it was that second goal in the second leg which took Barnsley out of the running, maybe even the corner goal from the first leg. But for me, I think it's time to look into this game. We've got two sides who, in my opinion, are good sides in the league, and I think we know how it works in the playoffs with most of the time the percentages for third place going up are much higher than any other position, and Oxford United are the bottom side. They are. They came into the playoffs, I think, in 5th position, but ultimately, if it wasn't for Barnsley's terrible form towards the end, they'd come in at 6th. And for me, I think this is a very interesting tie. Now, if we do look at the head-to-head between the both sides, you can see it shows massively in Bolton's favour over the years. Bolton haven't lost against Oxford since 2022 in the matches that we can see here. Now, obviously, they have lost in the past. 2 wins for Oxford, 2 draws between the two sides, and 5 wins for Bolton. And if we go back as early as the 12th of March, they won 5-0 in that fixture at the Tough Sheet Community Stadium. And for me, I think Ian Evatt has got to use that when he's going into this game. He's got to show the goals from that game. He's got to show the way they played in that game. Now, was that a turning point for Oxford United? Maybe so. We'll look into that in just a moment. But for me, I think Bolton will have the mental edge going into this one. But I think Oxford can take a lot of credit from the way they performed versus Peterborough United. You can let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Let me know your predictions. Who do you think is going to come out on top in this game? I personally think it's going to be a tight one. I know a lot of people think Bolton are going to thrash Oxford, but for me, I think it's going to be a very, very tight affair. Now, I did previously just mention, was the 5-0 defeat to Bolton a turning point for Oxford United? Now, if we do go ahead and look at the game since then, they have only lost 1 and drew 2 since those since those results came in. And for me, I think that was definitely a turning point for Des Buckingham in this squad. I think he's done an impressive job since coming in and taking over from Liam Manning. Yes, they've slipped down the division a little bit and ended up just sneaking into the playoffs. But for me, I think he came in at a tough time. They were second in the division. It wasn't a tough time for Oxford, but he came in off the back of Liam Manning, who had built a squad for his style of football, for what he wanted to do. And at the first real call-in, he jumped ship. And I think sometimes it's difficult to get back under the players and get the players back supporting a manager when that type of thing happens. I think it's pretty similar when owners get rid of managers in that position. We only have to go back a few years to Derby County when they got rid of Steve McLaren and Paul Clement at times when they were in really good positions. And I think that's something which Oxford weren't planning for. They obviously didn't want to lose Liam Manning, but it's something that happened and something they had to deal with. And I think that 5-0 defeat to Bolton gave Oxford a real call in, and it showed them where they need to be if they do want to get into the playoffs. And obviously they made it in the end, and they have made it to the playoff final. Now, one thing I did want to touch on is Oxford's defensive masterclass in that second leg. As you can see on screen, I've got the average positions of the Oxford United players. And as you can see, it's essentially a back eight. They've got 8 players in their own half, 2 forwards in the opposition half. But ultimately, everyone is pretty much within the D on an average. And for me, I think it's mega impressive what they did. And if we do just flip it over to Peterborough, even they were contained sort of right on the edge of their own box. But if you look at where the 4 is, right here, right, compared to the deepest centre half here, like, they're so much higher with Peterborough. And obviously that comes at a cost for Oxford United. They gave up a lot of the ball in that game, and they were happy to live without the ball. They did really well off the ball in that game. They did all the defensive work right, and they were able to sort of shut Peterborough down despite the talent that Peterborough have and the players that they have. The only chance that Peterborough really were able to create, which was clear cut, was the free kick from Harrison Burrows, which Josh Knight put in the back of the net. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Peterborough didn't have other chances, because they did. They had an abundance of chances in that game. But ultimately, because of the defensive structure that Des Buckingham set out, they just were unable to create many clear-cut opportunities. They had opportunities, there was clear-cut opportunities, but there was not many of them. And that is the important thing that Oxford can take heading into this game versus Bolton. Now, for me, if Oxford are going to win at Wembley, you can't rely on sitting counter. Now, are they going to? I don't think so. I think this was just a way, we've got to get to the final. They had the advantage from the first leg, so they took the defensive initiative and sat in. They've been fairly decent defensively all season, and for me, although they've had moments, I think, are they a better side than Bolton? I don't think so. But can they do a job over a game? I think that is definitely a possibility. And I think we saw it with the games against Peterborough. And that's something which Des Buckingham is going to have to call upon. No one expected them to beat Peterborough. I know they beat Peterborough a couple of weeks ago 5-0. But coming into the playoffs, everyone was like, oh, nobody's beating Peterborough. Peterborough are going to be in the final. It's going to be a Bolton-Peterborough final. And I think Oxford have showed that it's not a Bolton-Peterborough final. We've seen it. They've beat Peterborough. They're heading to Wembley to beat Bolton. And I'd really like to see Oxford United in the Championship. Do I think they're going to do it, though? I'm not sure. And as we've just spoke about the talking points from the average positions of the Oxford United side, I want to mention Santos, the central centre-half for Bolton Wanderers. He gets a lot of praise. A lot of praise. And I'm not saying I've watched him a lot this season. I've watched him against Derby in both games. And I've watched him, obviously, most recently is these 2 playoff games. I watched him in, I think it was the Shrewsbury game where it was important that they didn't win that game. And I have to be completely honest, I don't get the hype. Don't get me wrong, I think he's a good footballer. I think he's a very good League One centre-half. He has to rely a lot on his strength to overpower attackers and stuff like that. And I think we saw against Barnsley his weaknesses. Don't get me wrong, he has ability, but put him under pressure, get him moving, and he doesn't know what he's doing, in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, I think he's a threat in both boxes. Winning the ball from defensive headers, winning attacking headers, I think he's a threat. But is he ultimately this warrior, this brick wall, which Bolton fans think he is? In my opinion, I don't think so. Do I think he'll cut it in the Championship? I think he could be a bottom-end Championship centre-half, but I don't think he's one of those players that can go on to the next level, in my opinion. I don't think he's anywhere near top-end Championship. I think he's got a long way to go if he wants to be considered that. But what Oxford need to worry about, as we get on more about the average position talking points, I just had to say what I needed to say about Santos. Look at how congested it is in that Bolton middle of the pitch. You've got 4 players in the Bolton middle, and obviously you've got, I think that's Aaron Collins furthest forward. And don't get me wrong, I completely see what Bolton Wanderers do. They set up with sort of like a box midfield within their 5. Obviously, you have the 3 centre-halves that sit in. You've got 1 either side, and they go sort of wide and push the fullbacks on. And I think in the middle, they just get a bit caught up with each other, in my opinion. I think at times you've got too many players trying to do the same things. Obviously, you have Maghoma, who I believe is number 19, so he's in exactly where I think he goes, who pulls across to the right-hand side to get crosses into the box for the likes of Collins and Dion, and we saw him do that well within the 2 games against Barnsley. But for me, I think the problem for Bolton is that congestion in the middle. You've got 4 players who are in the same position as each other, and that's fine. But look at what those 4 players are. You've got Sheenan, you've got Thomason, you've got Dion, and then obviously you've got Maghoma, who's just a little bit to the right. But for me, I'm not a big fan of the way they set up. I don't think it works. Like, essentially, they've got a diamond midfield that isn't quite a diamond. It's sort of an off-shaped diamond. It's like a rhombus. But I'm not a big fan of the system. I like the style. I think they play some really nice football at times, and ultimately, I don't think they've necessarily always got the results they deserve this season, Bolton Wanderers. But I think Oxford, if they play their defensive structure, they're going to have no problems, because Bolton are just going to get congested in the middle, and it's going to open up the space of counter-attacks down these wings, in the channels between the 3 centre-halves. And obviously we saw Nathan Baxter made a couple of errors in that game against Barnsley, and it's one of those where, for me, I like Baxter. I think he's a brilliant goalkeeper. But I think if you put Bolton under pressure, then I think you can win the game. I do think it's a winnable game. I think Derby showed it. We didn't let Bolton we let Bolton have the ball, but didn't give them field control, if that makes sense. Now, off the ball, we had complete control of what was going off, where the ball was going. Don't get me wrong, Bolton had some good moments against Derby, but I think if Oxford can take a leaf out of our book, in my opinion, I thought the Peterborough game was it's exactly what I'd expect to see from Paul Warne. It's exactly what Paul Warne did against Portsmouth, and I still think we should have come out of that game with a win. I think if Oxford do what they did against Peterborough, I think they can shut down Bolton, but then it's about, are they going to have the ability to create chances for themselves to go on and win the game? And that's where the real question comes into play for me, because that's where they're going to have their difficulty. Are you going to be able to get into the channels? Are you going to be able to break down that back 3? I think it's possible to break down the back 3, even if it's set pieces. There's ways to break down that defensive structure of Bolton. And I think Oxford, I don't think they're favourites going into this game. And I think that helps them if they want to play this style, because them sitting in isn't going to cause fans a problem, in my opinion. Obviously, they'll get stressed when Bolton get near the box and things like that, but that's just what fans do. But ultimately, I think if they want to play that defensive structure, I think it would be perfect for a game like this, in such an important game. Realistically, if they take it all the way to penalties and lose, I think they've had a brilliant day at Oxford. If they take it all the way to penalties, then it's 50-50 on who wins. I don't think it will go to penalties, but we'll see. Shall we take a look into some of the danger men for both sides, and who are the men who put up the numbers? Let's start off with Bolton. I've already mentioned a few of their key players. Obviously, you've got Dion, you've got Aaron Collins, Victor Adebayo, you've got Cameron Jerome to come off the bench, and they've got some really impressive players at Bolton Wanderers. You've even got George Thomason in midfield. You've got Josh Sheenan in midfield. They've got some really, really good players to come off the bench. They've got some good players that start the games as well. And the players who Oxford are going to really have to look out for is, obviously, for me, I think it's important that if they're going to let Bolton play, you need to give Josh Sheenan, give him a runway. Let him have the ball. Let him do what he wants, but let him do it in their half. You can't let Sheenan get on the ball in the opposition half, because he'll find Dion, he'll find Aaron Collins, he'll find Randall Williams on the left-hand side, he'll find their right fullback, he'll find Paris Maghoma in those spaces on the right-hand side too. And this is the real question. Are Oxford going to be able to contain this Bolton team? Now, we've seen that Bolton have done a job on them previously, 5-0 win. But we also seen that Oxford beat Peterborough 5-0. So there is possibilities that this Oxford team could come out fighting, and they might not sit in. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I'm really interested to see the tactical battle between the two sides and the two managers. Will Ian Evatt stick with his three at the back? I think he will. Like, there's no reason to change it now. Will Oxford stick with their defensive structure? I think it's the smart thing to do for Oxford. I think it gives them the best possible chance of winning. So, the big player who I do want to mention is Dion Charles. Obviously, he spent a lot of time out injured this season, but he scored twice in the playoffs, and that's what matters. He showed up when it mattered, and he showed up in the final game of the season. He has really shown up when he's needed to. Now, unfortunately, he didn't get them into automatic promotion places, but he's got them to Wembley, and that is the important thing. And he is, in my opinion, one of the better forwards in the league. You look at how he ended the season: 7.4, 7.7, 8.9. Obviously wasn't massively influential in the second leg, but ultimately I think Barnsley were the better side in that game anyway, so doesn't really surprise me. You'll have to let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think Dion Charles is the danger man? Should they be more worried about Aaron Collins? Should they be more worried about Maghoma in midfield? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Now we look at the Oxford side. Now, Cameron Brannagan, I'll say it time and time again. I've said it in both the preview videos, both the review videos. If he has a good game, Oxford will more than likely win. I can't see Oxford losing if Brannagan has a good game. Obviously, Mark Harris, massively influential, 15 goals, 4 assists this season. You've got Josh Murphy with 4 assists, Owen Dale 4 assists. You've got Ruben Rodriguez, 9 goals, 3 assists. And obviously, Cameron Brannagan, 12 goals, 9 assists. I think Brannagan scored 10 out of 10 penalties this season. So you do not want it to go to penalties if you are Bolton Wanderers. You've got Elliot Moore, one of the defensive players, and he's been incredible for me. I think he's been really good through the playoffs so far as well. And then you have to feel for Tyler Goodrum. Is he going to be fit to play in the final? I haven't heard any pre-match or anything as I'm recording this. I'm recording it on the 13th of May. You'll probably see this on the 15th or 16th. I think it's going to be a very interesting battle between the two sides. I've picked out a key man for Oxford United, and that key man is Cameron Brannagan. I think it's really hard to look past him when you look at this Oxford side. And I think the fact that he's still there speaks volumes to his affinity with the club. Now, he obviously loves the club. He's been there since leaving since leaving Liverpool on a free transfer. He's played 289 games, 54 goals, God knows how many assists. Like, he's such a brilliant player in the centre of the park. And every year there's discussions on, is he going to move on? Where's he going to go? Is he going to stay? And he always seems to be signing new contracts at Oxford, so he must be happy. He's one of the better players in the league for chance creation. One of the better players in the league for actually setting up goals and getting the final assist. He's a really good goal-scoring midfielder. And yes, his goals come from penalties, but a goal's a goal. It doesn't matter how you score him. If it goes in, it goes in. If they win 1-0 by a second-minute penalty, do you think Oxford are going to care that it was a penalty? Absolutely not. So for me, it's very, very interesting to see how this game is going to play out in the end. Now, let's make a final prediction. I do think Oxford are going to come in, and I think Des Buckingham's going to show that he spent more time at the Paul Wolf School of Defending, and I do think Oxford are going to come away victorious in this game. Bolton's celebrations after the Peterborough game, after the Barnsley game, I think it feels like a few Bolton fans and maybe players think job's done. And I think they'll see Oxford as the easier tie, in my opinion, rather than having Peterborough. And for me, I think Oxford are going to come away as winners. I think it's going to be a very, very tight game. I think it's going to be end-to-end. I think Oxford are going to try and hit Bolton on the counter. And I think there's going to be a defensive mistake from Bolton, which puts Oxford in the lead. I do think Bolton are going to fight back. I think the game's going to end 2-1. I think Dion Charles is going to score at Wembley. I think who's going to score for Oxford? I think Brannigan's going to pop up with one. And I think maybe Murphy pops up with the second. But I think in the end, I think Oxford United are going to get to the Championship, and I think it's going to be a massive moment, but I think it's going to be too early for Oxford. I think they're not quite ready for that step up to the Championship yet, but let's see how it plays out. So that is my preview for this weekend's playoff final. You'll have to let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I'd love to know who you predict is going to win this game. I think it's a very difficult one to call. I do think it's going to be a tight game. I do think Oxford just edge it, but I think Bolton have the quality to come out and really shut Oxford up. But are Oxford going to be able to keep up their defensive masterclass from the Peterborough game? That is the big conversation topic here. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. If you have not done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button, and I'll catch you in my next video. Make sure to go and find me on TikTok, pictured here, and Twitter, pictured here. These are the places where I'll keep you all up to date with all my upcoming videos and my thoughts and feelings around the Formula 1 and football weekend.